So we're getting ready to enter into a new phase of Real Presence, Real Future, and a number of new assignments and such have come out. And I know that idea of moving towards evangelization. How do you see some incremental small steps that we've kind of made in that area with this?
Well, I think we've listened to the feedback of the people in a lot of different areas, and I've gone out to the different parishes and been with the people and seen with my own eyes what might be necessary. And I really am sympathetic at times to rural areas, but I think of Muskingum County. The original Real Presence, Real Future recommendation was that there would be one priest for the whole county. And that would have involved possibly closing St. Anne's in Dresden or the Mission in Mattingly Settlement, St. Mary's, both of which are beautiful old churches. St. Thomas the Apostle in Zanesville, where the Dominicans have been for nearly 200 years, but they need some major repairs. And then St. Nicholas Church there also, and the elementary school and high school are there, plus the Genesis Hospital. Can one priest really evangelize in all those places and do so effectively? Well, if he's got deacons and very active lay people, and there are good people there, but I think something more is needed, because part of what fuels our efforts at evangelization is access to the sacraments. And so we went back, we listened to feedback, we looked at who might be available, and now we're going to have a pastor and an assistant at the two churches in Zanesville itself, St. Thomas and St. Nicholas. We're going to have a priest who's assigned as a chaplain both to the high school, part-time to high school, part-time to the hospital to take care of the pastoral care there. So you're evangelizing different communities and populations there. And Father Ralco was at St. Nicholas, and he was very generous, saying, look, I'm willing to move even at a more advanced age and take on two parishes. And those parishes then have a new lease on life, if you will, so that we could be creative with our personnel to say, okay, let's make a real push at evangelization. And I think we tried to do that. We got lucky sometimes. We were blessed with religious orders and international priests saying, we want to come to the Diocese of Columbus. They see us as a diocese on the grow. And so we've really been blessed. We've got the Capuchins, who have been a long time in Tuscarawas County, now coming back to the Diocese of Columbus, and there'll be 5 of them at Christ the King, which allows us to continue to minister effectively to the people of Christ the King and St. Thomas the Apostle, which are largely Spanish-speaking communities now.
And I know you, Dr. DeFault and Father Daly, the Vicar for Religious, have been working on the high schools too, as far as within Columbus, of trying to get more priestly and religious presence into.
Exactly. We were trying to have priests as chaplains. Bishop Brennan had already initiated that, and we see that that's already bearing fruit in terms of the number of young men considering priesthood or religious life. I think that's a first fruit already of those efforts to have the Salesian sisters in some of our high schools. That presence, again, gives young women a sense of being consecrated to the Lord. But it's also the presence of the church there each and every day in the lives of our young people. So we made a concerted effort not to neglect, for example, our youth. And so that's been a real blessing. And we're going to try to have more and more in the coming years priests teaching in the high schools, and really we're working to try to recapture a sense, to strengthen really the Catholic identity of our schools.
Right. So there's different parishes are at different stages, right? In the Real Presence, Real Future, it seems like we're already hearing about some places where decrees have been issued, things are already in place or are happening. What kind of goes into some of the places being at a different spot in this process?
Well, some parishes you knew were going to be kind of what we might call standalone parishes, huge parishes with big schools, and they're going to be, they're strong enough, they're independent. And then the other parishes that are in more rural areas where you had to see, okay, the population there is declining, but you have 2 churches. How do you bring these communities together? Maybe you have one priest, but he's got 2 parishes. Okay, but they're separate parishes. They're still separate parishes. Other times you can see, okay, this parish's financial condition isn't so good. This parish isn't either, but together they could be much stronger. They can't afford 2 separate staffs, but they could share a staff. And so in those cases, a pastor might be asked, bring these 2 parishes together into one parish. So sometimes that happens. In other cases, we also saw, look, this small parish, they hardly have it on the basis of the data. They were once a great parish, but now people have moved away. the population is aging. The people don't live in the neighborhood anymore. They have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of maintenance costs. Their expenses are outstripping their income every year. And so we could say, look, this isn't the best use of resources, and we would be better off perhaps going to a more dynamic or vibrant community at this stage. And so sometimes you reach that kind of decision. You have to say, okay, but how do we reach that decision? We looked at the data, then we brought the priest met with his parish council, and town hall meetings were held. The regional Episcopal vicars were in on those town hall meetings to answer people's questions. In some cases, I went to the parishes and I talked to the people myself and answered their questions to help clarify why this was necessary, given the demographics, given the financial situation, given the situation of maintenance, and the fact that I don't have a ton of money or a ton of priests. And even if I did, right, if I'm in the city of Columbus, people have regular access to the sacraments. But in other cases, you sometimes have one priest for the whole county in our diocese. And so how do we keep access for people to the sacraments and to the life of the church? And so that was a big factor. And then there's an actual process according to canon law that has to be followed when a decree is issued, and parish territory and parish property assets and liabilities have to go from one parish to another. And so little by little, people like Monsignor Maloney, the Vicar General, and people like our regional Episcopal vicars have been working very closely with pastors and those transition teams to try to bring people together. And again, it's never easy to make those decisions, but decisions that have been put off sometimes for decades are now having to be made. Part of the Real Presence, Real Future process is to put ourselves in a position to evangelize so we never have to be in this position again, right? We want to be forward-looking. So the Real Presence, Real Future process has brought us into a new era. I sort of liken it as to Christopher Columbus trying to have his voyage to the New World. He had all kinds of preparation and things that he had to do before setting sail. And we're about to set sail on a new mission. We're not exactly sure where it will lead, but we know that the Holy Spirit is the one guiding the mission. And sometimes we'll have to discern. Maybe we go a little bit this way, maybe we go a little bit that way. But either way, we want to keep listening to what the churches have to say and listening to what the Spirit has to say.
So decisions. You've been, it was projected that around the time of Pentecost, decisions would be made about the recommendations. So we had those recommendations that were issued last spring, if I remember correctly. And you were just becoming bishop at the time. And so I know you wanted to take some time. And so maybe you can kind of describe what's been...
So when I first was named bishop, the second round had just finished. And then there was another period, though, where the planning team, the Real Presence, Real Future planning team made up of priests, deacons, lay people, they continued to meet, and near the end of August, they made final recommendations to me. But during the course of the year, as I said, I was visiting a lot of the parishes and listening to the feedback that the regional Episcopal vicars and others were giving me. People write to me all the time about their parish and wanting to keep their parish home. So I take those to heart. I read those letters. It's not that I can always do something about every little detail, but I take those, really kind of took those to heart. But because we got ahead of the game with the priest personnel board and making assignments, that helped us to see what the playing field would be, and to, in light of Real Presence, Real Future recommendations, make assignments of priests, but then also to think about, okay, where do we need to begin to initiate these canonical processes, or where do we need to begin to form transition teams so things go very smoothly. So I think we're on track. So at a certain point in the process, I, as bishop, have to make a judgment. Do I accept the final recommendation or not accept the final recommendation? If I say I accept this recommendation, there's a whole process then of implementation of that recommendation. Like, it's not going to happen like overnight. Rather, the expectation would be that priests would work with their people in trying to implement really a better mission, a better pastoral plan for that particular parish, for evangelization, for catechesis, for education of our young people, for sacramental care of the people in those parishes. And so that implementation will take a period of time. So we don't need to rush. Sometimes we're not going to accept the recommendation, but we're going to wait and see what happens, because we're expecting all these people to come to Columbus. And so discernment is always ongoing.